Okay, today on the show, we have Jessica Valentina. She is known as the Latina Business Coach. She's a business coach, podcast host, mentor, community leader, and founder of the women's group Femina. She helps Latinas build six-figure online businesses so they can bridge the Latina pay gap and never be limited to a dollar amount again. From failed entrepreneur to having five-figure months in less than a year, Jessica has made it her mission to bridge the Latina pay gap by helping Latina entrepreneurs create their own American dream by monetizing the skills and knowledge they already possess. You guys, I met Jessica a few weeks ago at a brunch and I was like, who is this girl? I love her. She walked up and she was like, oh, I just had a launch. And everyone's like, how did it go? And she's like, it went really well, but I forgot to put a cap on it. And I had 20 people sign up instead of 15. And we all were like, what? Like, who are you? That's amazing. And I knew ever since then, I went and followed her on Instagram and I was like, I have to have this girl on the podcast. You guys are going to love her story and everything that she went through and having a bunch of failed businesses until she now has her very successful Latina business coach business. You guys are going to love her tips. So get some pens out and paper so you can take some notes. And really quickly, I want to remind you that the Instagram Sisterhood 2021 is open for registration. You can head on over to my Instagram, send me a DM if you are interested. I'm bringing together a community of women that really want to go deep and work on themselves and actually develop vulnerable relationships with each other while giving themselves experiences that will change their life. When I look back at 2020, I started out the year with like business and strategy and being like, this is what's going to change my life. And actually, when I look back, it was the trips and the things that we did there with the trips, like breath work and energy stuff and things like that, that actually ended up producing the most transformation in me, which then led to the biggest transformation in my business. And I really wanted to bring that together to give you next year. I wanted to give you a chance to get away, to have some out of the norm experiences like breathwork and energy work and going deep with other women and letting yourself do things and experience things and have that community that you might not have otherwise, because that is what will truly change your life. When you change, everything else changes. And I want to gift that to you in 2021. So join the Instagram Sisterhood. Go on over to my IG, send me a DM. I'll give you an application. We'll see if it's a great fit. It is filling up. Spots are already going, and it is limited. I can't wait to see you in there because it's going to be a life-changing 6 months together. And if you join before November 30th, you get an extra one-on-one call with me. All right, I'll see you guys on the gram. All right, welcome Jessica to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much, Joy, for having me on. I'm so honored to be here and to just be able to have a conversation with you and talk to your tribe and share my story and be of service in any way.
Yes. So first things first, everyone needs to go follow her on Instagram. She's the Latina Business Coach on Instagram, and I love all of her stuff. And you have an awesome following, and they're very engaged. So clearly they love your stuff too. But she's always dropping amazing tips about business and figuring out your niche and monetizing what you want to do, which I think is so smart. But tell everyone your story and how you became the Latina Business Coach.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for letting me share. So you guys, I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but growing up, I was never like the smart one. I was never the athletic one. I was never the talented one. My brother was like, he'll probably be a doctor. My sister was like, she's probably going to be a singer or Broadway star. And I was just the pretty one, right? Like, maybe you should marry rich. My little brother said that to me once. And I was like, yeah, because I didn't have any gifts or talents, right? And so sometimes we feel stuck in that because people are always like, monetize your talents, your gifts, and your passions. And my struggle was I was multi-passionate. I cared about so many things. I'm an esthetician by trade, and I grew up in the beauty industry. My mom was a single mom, a hairdresser. So I literally grew up doing my homework on nail stations and just watching my mom just like be a therapist and literally just help women with their confidence. And I just always heard that girl talk. We were always in an environment of women and helping women growing up. You know, my mom did that, but I was always just trying to find my thing. So right about, I would say 22, I found myself working at a call center, a corporate job, and I was making really good money in sales. At that point, I just was like, wow, I should be really happy with this. I make more money than my friends in college. I'm 22. And I just found myself like every time I would go to work, I would clock in, I would get anxiety, and I would be like, like it was slowly just dying inside, just not doing what I knew I was meant for more. And I just was like, what is my next step? So I dabbled into some network marketing. I dabbled into, again, I'm an esthetician. So I like started my own spa. At one point, I just had all these different businesses I was doing, right? Because I had read in this book that said, if you want to be a millionaire, you should have 7 streams of income. And so I was like, okay, yeah, let me create 7 streams of income all at the same time. I had a t-shirt business, a spa. Again, I was like doing yoga in the park. Like you guys, I was that person that if like you saw me on Instagram, we would probably meet in a parking lot and I would sell you something. And then while you were there, I'd be like, hey, are you also interested in skincare or makeup or a t-shirt, right? Like I was always just like, I love the hustle. I've always just like never been afraid to put myself out there and sell things. And even though it was super fun, I felt like at one point people were just so confused on what I did. So that was really like the struggle with me as a business owner was like, even though I was making money with one business, I would use that money and then use it to fuel my other business, make some money there, use it to fuel my other business. So I never had real income flowing through that was like I could spend or, use on other things. I was just always reinvesting in the next big idea. And so I was super busy with all of these businesses. I started to not feel well. All of a sudden, I just like kept getting like cramps. I was super tired. I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe I had an ovarian cyst. I went to the gynecologist and literally I was 10 weeks pregnant. Yeah. I was like,
oh my gosh.
This. Yeah. And she was like, well, you're pregnant. And I was like, what? Like, it was so unexpected. It kind of just put me at a standstill because I was like, how am I 10 weeks pregnant and like didn't realize it, right? Like that show, I didn't know I was pregnant. I'm like, that was me. At that point, I was like, okay, let me just slow down. Let me just, focus on one thing. I started just focusing on makeup while I was pregnant, laying low. And after I had my daughter, Joy, 6 weeks later, I got pregnant with my son.
Oh my gosh.
I know, girl. So I literally went from 0 to 2 kids in 1 year. They're what you call Irish twins. Currently, they're both 3. My daughter turns 4 at the end of the month. Yeah. So right now I have 2 3-year-olds, right?
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. It was fun, but I was like, oh my gosh, how did it was its own experience. But once I had these 2 little babies, I was like, okay, well, I guess this is my life now. I'm a stay-at-home mom and everything. I literally was like, I'm just not meant for the entrepreneur life. I quit. I sold my businesses and I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay home with my kids. And I never want to say just a stay-at-home mom, but like when I was always on the go, I was like, okay, well now I just sit at home and like watch Netflix and fold laundry and flannel and Uggs, every day, all day. And so I was like, okay, I felt like it had led me up to, I actually didn't know this was a thing, but I struggled with postpartum anxiety. And the more I started talking about that and the more I talk about it now, I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that type of postpartum. I don't know, like sometimes we think it's just sadness or anger, but for me, it was anxiety. I would just like not want to leave my house. I had 2 littles and it was debilitating.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. There's so much here that we can dig into. I'm like wrapping my head around getting pregnant at 6 weeks because at 6 weeks, you're like just easing back in to the sex pool, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh. So I can totally relate to when you have your kids wanting something else besides being a mom. When you're at this point and you're like, okay, now I want something else besides being a mom, but you've tried all of these other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, well, what should I do? I know I was like, oh, what should I do? Literally, that's where I was at this standstill. And I said, I have so much experience. I have so much potential. I know I have this vision of myself right now. Like when I looked at myself, I was overweight. I was in flannel and just like not my normal self, So I was like, okay, what can I go back to? I started to look for a coach because I thought maybe somebody could just kind of guide me through this next process. I have so many ideas. I don't know which one to pick. So should I go back into beauty? Should I go back into t-shirts, right? And so I was like, okay, which one should I pick? I started to Google Latina Business Coach. I started to look her up on Instagram, hashtags, and she did not exist. Okay. And so really quick, I mean, that's my niche is Latina entrepreneurs, right? I'm a Latina, but just when I think of our market, our population, like everything, I'm like, well, there's so many of us that I'm also like, wait, how is there so open. So when I saw that there was an opportunity there, I was like, okay, I just have to go and create her. So I kept looking for a coach, and I honestly feel like that's the first step that really changed my life and helped me grow. Literally within a year, helped me develop and really get clear on my niche and my mission. But through that, I'm just so glad I like doubled down. And so now that's that story of just being this multi-passionate entrepreneur, just having all these different businesses, kind of being laughed at, not taken serious, and just, you know, like nobody at one point, I feel like people were just confused on like what you do. And like, I remember going to my husband's company, like Christmas party, and they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I have this and I have this and I have this. And they're all like engineers and boring, you know, like it was boring. And they were like, oh, that's great. Wow, Daniel, your wife is so, you know, and they're just confused. Like they don't get entrepreneur life at all. And I was like, okay, I feel really unaccomplished. I feel really dumb. I feel like I'm a hot mess. But yeah, so once I like reinvented myself, literally, I reinvented myself. I picked one idea, which was doubling down on what I was good at, which was creating strategies around, you know, like starting businesses. And so I had started many businesses, and that was the pivot, and the direction I took was helping other women start businesses. And so it's developed into a few more things from there, and I can share more about that. But I feel like,
yeah. Oh yeah, I have so much to say. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I'm an open book. You can ask me anything. Yeah.
First of all, I love that you thought to get a coach before having a business, because so many people come to me and say, wait, you're telling me to get a coach before I have a business? I felt like I should have a business and like have some income before I get a coach. And I'm always like, that is so backwards.
Right.
Because a coach is how you get the business. So how did you have that insight for that?
You know what? I think it was just my background in kind of like network marketing. I always had really good mentors, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm not in network marketing and I don't have anybody to mentor me. And I really felt that kind of just like that, having somebody just want to invest in you, believe in you, that kind of thing. I felt like that was missing. Not that I didn't have good support with my husband, but for me, that was like, okay, well, I guess this is a thing. And then I was like, wait, if I'm looking for someone, then maybe that could be something for me. Because, right, see, the thing is that even while I was staying at home, and I sat out for a year, making it sound like it was quick, but I mean, it was a year, right? And I was at home. And the thing was that people were still asking me about businesses. So I felt like that's one of the key things that I talk about now is, hey, like, what are people asking you about consistently? And even when I had quit all my businesses and I wasn't doing any of those things anymore, randomly people would be like, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you because I'm thinking about starting this. And I think you had a background in that. Oh, hey, I'm thinking about this and this, right? When I was working at the spa, I went back to the spa very, very part-time, honestly, just to get out of the house and just to like hang out with my client friends, really, really part-time on the weekends. And even then, my boss at the spa, she was asking me for business advice, right? My boss.
Yeah.
My clients, they would come and be like, oh, I have this idea, blah, 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 or I'm doing this. And I would be giving them business advice while I'm like, you know, popping their pimples. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm always talking about business. This is something that's so exciting for me. And so if there are any women that are listening that are multi-passionate, maybe they've had just kind of this crazy journey, when you look back and you look at that common thread of like, what was the same thing that you enjoyed in your position at work or in those different, maybe you've tried different things, what's the common thread? And for me, it was always just teaching and sharing knowledge. That was my favorite part. Even with skin, my clients would come for a facial and I'm like trying to school them on acne and teach them, and they just want to relax. And I'm like, okay, I'm like in the wrong field right now.
And your skin looks amazing. I'm going to have to get like your info of where you go now that I live out here. Yeah. I love that you created based on the hole that you saw. Because I tell people that all the time. What is the hole that you see? That's what you're supposed to do, right? Like that's what you're called to fill. But I think so many people would have looked like you did for a Latina business coach and said, there is no one. And then they would have said, but who am I to do that? And I love that you were like, I'll just do it. Like what gave you the confidence to be like, yeah, I can be a business coach. I can call myself a coach, because I work with a lot of coaches and they definitely struggle with like, who's going to want to listen to me? Who's going to hire me? Like, don't I need a certification? Like all the things.
Yeah. So I looked up all of the certification. Again, I'm a college dropout. I'm not good at anything, right? So I'm like, when it comes to imposter syndrome, 100%, I dealt with that as well. And I struggled with it. Like, oh wait, I don't know if I could do this. But at the same time, confidence is something that I feel like was always instilled in me from a young age. Again, I shared with you that my mom is beauty industry, and she just has that, like, just from an early age. I just really believe that any skill can be acquired. right? Like there's very few, obviously if you're a doctor or like those types of things where like a lawyer, right? You need a college degree, but pretty much everything nowadays, you can really learn that skill, right? In quarantine, like people that were like at home, like all of a sudden they're chefs and they're like knitting and creating jewelry, right? Like you can really learn those skills. And so I was like, okay, let me just pick one thing. And that's my thing now. It's like, all right, I have a lot of ideas. Let me pick one, learn and just binge on it, get really, really good at it so that I do feel even more confident to be able to show up and talk about it.
Yes, 100%. Now, you were someone that people would come to for advice, right? Which is also what I tell people, like what do people ask you for? Because that's a sign into what you should be doing. And then the next hurdle that my clients usually have is, well, I've been giving it to them for free, and now I'm going to ask them to pay me for it. And sometimes they get kickback on like, what do you mean? Like now I have to pay you for it. Did you experience that at all?
Oh God, this is such a good question. Okay, so this is such a good question because it's true. So many people are out there. They have this, it's like experience, right? It's things that you can't learn in a book, that you can't just read. It's like a life experience. A lot of my clients, they've been through things that, like divorce, finances, overcoming debt, losing weight. Like there's things that you've been through that you've overcome that people are now asking you about. How did you do that? How did you start that? Right? In my case, it was like, how did you start that business? Hey, what did you end up doing for that? I know you had a lot of success. Tell me about that. At first, you're flattered because someone thought of you. At first, you're like, wow, thank you so much for thinking of me. Oh my God, I want to give you all of my knowledge. And then they take that knowledge, and then they go and they get a result. Next, they either come back for more advice or they send somebody your way like, hey, you should go talk to Joy. You should go talk to Jessica. She knows all about that. She really helped me, right? Then the second time they come to you and you're like, oh, wow, that was nice of them to refer you. Let me help. Yeah, I'll share, here's this and this. And then they go take your advice, go get a result, build something, do something big. And you're like, whoa, dang, like, whoa, I helped somebody do something, right? Like it's just still kind of like sitting and you're like, that's cool. That's really like interesting. Then the third time you're like, wait, hold on. Like, is this a business? Right. And that's like, for me, that was my thing, was like, oh wait, is this a business? Like, should I be charging for this? How do I charge for this? How do I how do I turn a business out of this? And when we think business, we think traditional brick and mortar, we think product, we think like maybe a service, like you come and I do something for you, like, like your hair, your lashes, whatever. No, in 2020, especially with COVID, like that's what this has taught us is like, wow, we can pretty much create businesses out of thin air just based on our experience, our knowledge, and our skills. That's literally what I created my entire academy about now, is using those skills, how to monetize those skills, right? And for me, my favorite way of monetizing that now is in the form of a digital product. So yes, people of course were like, wait, what do you mean you're a coach? Like you can't just give me advice for free. And obviously you have to, as you grow, you have to set boundaries and just be like, hey, this is my business now, right? But at the same time, still offering something tangible that people can still buy. And when you create a package or a service like that, it makes it easier for them to wrap their brain around like, oh, okay, this is something I have to pay for.
How did you make that transition to being someone that was giving for free to now people are buying? Did you start with one-on-one clients? Did you create a course from the get-go? How did you start?
Yeah, I literally created a course from the get-go. I created a group course. My original course was called Launch Your Concept, right? And it just consisted of like, I have an idea. I have lots of ideas. Then I help them pick one idea. Then from that idea, we just kept developing it over 8 weeks and building it, monetizing, packaging it, pricing it, launching it. That was the course. And I had so much success with that. But a lot of women were wanting to start businesses in person, right? Like brick and mortar. And then COVID hit and I was like, wait, I need to pivot quick onto online because everybody should have something online anyway.
Yep.
And it was always the idea was to help and support mentors and coaches, to create digital products online or to create programs. But COVID made that happen earlier and faster. So I just had to pivot really quick into that. And it's been the best thing I ever did. And it's hard because COVID, I know a lot of people are struggling with obviously all of the obvious effects, but business wise, I think that was one of the best things that ever happened to me just because I was able to pivot so quickly into the online space.
Yes. So when you made a course from the get-go, did you do it in a Facebook group? Did you pay to like host it in an app? Because I think a lot of people when they're getting started also don't understand what can go into making a course. And when
Mhm.
they don't have cash coming in, I try to help them understand how they can do it in a way that's more cost effective for where their business is at, and to make sure that people actually want it. Because you can create a course, and then if people don't actually buy it or want it,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was something that one of my original coaches had advised me too, was like, hey, don't build out this huge course and presentation because you don't know if people want it yet, right? So I did a lot of market research. I did a lot of listening to the questions I was already being asked, right? I built the framework, like the bones of it, which is what I always recommend my clients do too. And I'll be honest, when I first launched Latina Business Coach, I did everything, right? I was like the definition of a solopreneur. I did all of my own branding, my logo. I used Canva. I still use, I still love to do that stuff for my business. It's fun for me. And when I was like, okay, how do I do this? It was just Zoom calls and a Facebook group. Exactly. That's it. That's why I love having an online business, is because it is little overhead, but you're able to show up and like work with multiple people at the same time in a group setting, which was my case, and really just started from nothing. I didn't actually work with somebody professionally on like my brand and my logo and all of that until even maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh, yeah. I tell people that all the time. Like, I just got a website like a few
Mhm.
months ago.
Yeah.
And then like I had a new client getting started, and she's like, oh, I see everybody has these link trees. I'm like, girl, you don't need one. Like, don't worry about a link tree. You
Yeah.
need to just sign people up.
Yeah.
So when people come to you and they're like, oh, I have these ideas and I want to monetize it, and you're like, awesome. Have you ever had someone come to you and you're like, I don't think we can monetize that? Like, how do you have this course that's basically promising someone they can have an idea and you can help them monetize it? How do you have that? Well, some people I think come up with ideas where you're like, not so sure.
I could sell ice to an Eskimo vibe, right? Like I'm like mood. It's a whole mood. Tell
You
me.
can, but can your clients?
Yes. So it's all about the marketing and the messaging, first of all.
100%.
So it's this is such a good question too, because a lot of clients come, a lot of women, they know that they are wanting to inspire, motivate, encourage women, and that's what they want to do. Okay, great. That's not for sale. Motivation and inspiration is not for sale. So how can we monetize that? Can we create a program? Can we create a mentorship? Can we create a monthly membership of like an exclusive Facebook community? Can you create an ebook? Can you create like girl, I'm like, I'll bust out the list of all of the ways that we can monetize your signature framework, what makes you you, and how you want to empower women. How can you do that, and how can we put a price tag on it? So there's very few ideas that I've encountered. Like honestly, I'm trying to think of something that somebody has come to me with and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think that that's a business.
So here's my follow-up question to that. Once you help them realize, okay, how can we make this into a monetized thing? How do you direct them to start going and getting sales? Because most of them most likely don't have that large of a following. So it's not like they're going to post it and sales start rolling in. Even if it's a $10 ebook, you probably still need to go advertise it. So how do you teach people how to advertise it?
So I'm actually really based on organic marketing and just everything that I have also built. I don't have 10,000 followers on Instagram even. And so I think that sometimes we associate a large audience with a large bank account or large revenue stream, and that's also not true. A lot of the times it's really just starting to pivot, right? So for me, I went from beauty entrepreneur to business coach. How did I do that? That's part of my strategy, is just changing that messaging, changing that branding, really starting to position myself as an expert in a specific thing, right? In that niche. So it's really just pivoting your messaging, your marketing, and creating content that's going to make you an expert, that's going to start showing people like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. She's adding value. And if she's adding this much value in here or in just for free, then I wonder what it's like to work with her ebook. I wonder what it's like to take her course, right? So kind of just, it's not just like a one day, hey, I have an ebook. It's warming up the audience to that and staying consistent with that strategy of that pivot.
And then do you teach them any kind of DMs, like starting DM conversations, all of that too?
Mm-hmm. So my favorite thing is like, honestly, I think a lot of times people are always looking at like, oh, like, we get into this mindset with social media where and you girl, you're the social media expert, but people get through scrolling. I hardly scroll through Instagram. I'm more of a content creator than a consumer, right?
Yes.
But when I go through my content, I'm like, okay, more so who's watching me? And if it's the same people that are consistently watching you, your stories, your likes, that are consistently commenting, then that's who I reach out to. I'm not like,
Right.
oh, let me, who am I watching? Right. I'm like, no, wait,
Right.
who's watching me?
Correct.
And so I go back and I just kind of go through that and maybe reach out, start a conversation. I always try to reply to comments. So just warming up that audience, because the more that you engage, it makes it easier for you to build that relationship for them to buy from you.
Yes. Yes. So one of your most recent posts, we were chatting about this before, is you in Gucci taking a picture with this amazing headband that I totally thought was yours. You're going to have to go get it. And I was like, I freaking love this girl because she's showing, and you were talking, I think, about how, I think you were sharing some of your story in the post and how you used to be a has-been, which I
Yes.
love that. And you tried all the things. And I just loved, number one, the fact that you were like rewarding yourself and going to Gucci. And then number two, the fact that you were owning that and you were totally bold about that. I recently did a launch in August that was like one of my biggest launches. And I rewarded myself by going and getting my first pair of Louis Vuittons, the red bottom shoes, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I didn't show that at all on my Instagram. And I'm like the person that shows everybody everything. I didn't want to, like, I didn't want to pull out my phone. I didn't want to film it. I didn't even want to tell people I was getting them, which felt so weird to me because I usually love to show everything, but it felt like I needed to hide it, right? I felt so like, I can't show people this. People are going to judge me. People are going to be like, that's what you're spending our money on. Like that fear of like people being like, yeah, we're paying you and now you're going to show us what you're doing with our money type thing. And I know, because I'm a coach, that that's not a correct mindset, right? And I did end up telling people about it on the podcast and a post, but I wanted to talk to you about that because I love that you were just like, snapshot, here I am in Gucci, rewarding myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. True. It's something I think that we all struggle with, right? We're like, oh, well, we're entrepreneurs and now we are generating income in our business and we have a little extra money to spend on ourselves, to treat ourselves. I'm a mom of toddlers, right? And so like, you guys know, like the first things you're like, hey, like, what can I like for me, when I look at my budget, I'm like, what am I going to reinvest back into my business? What do I need, like just life stuff. And then I'm also like, hey, cool. Like maybe I could treat myself to something. And so that's just become a part of my, like my launch reward. Like I was sharing, it's just as like treating myself to something nice and not feeling guilty about it. Not just treating myself because it's the holidays or my birthday or trying to justify it. It's like, no, like for me, it was a bag. So like one of my big, like you were saying with one of your launches a couple months ago, I had a great launch, I think in August as well. And I was like, oh, I just really want a new bag. And I actually went to Louis Vuitton and I was like, oh, I just want like like a boss bag. Mm-hmm. Right. And so then I think of it from the other perspective too. If like, I help women build 6-figure online businesses. And so I also have a 6-figure business, and then I can't be showing up with like a Target plastic bag, right? Like a Target bag, not the Target brand, but I'm saying like, like a plastic bag that serves the same purpose. I'm like, no, like I want it to be a reflection of me and my brand and like working hard and how that pays off when you stay consistent. So I also felt reluctant. I recorded everything while I was at the store, but I didn't post it until later.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, hey guys, I ended up getting this really beautiful backpack for just treating myself for this launch. And every single like feeling that you described, I also felt. I was like, people are going to think that I'm spending, but I'm also like, hey, when we get a check from from like our corporate job, like we don't ever have to justify that, right? It's the same thing. It's like, oh, well, I work for a bank and they cut me a check because of my salary. And now I'm not going to feel bad for spending that at Louis Vuitton. Why would I feel bad for, using my income from my business that I worked really hard on? So I totally feel you on that. The Gucci one was like, it's kind of a trick because I'm wearing this really nice headband, but I haven't bought it yet. And I like to go and visualize, right? I like to go and shop around. I still like to window shop. And I put that headband on. It's a wrap. It's like almost $500. And I've tried it on twice. And I'm like, oh, I love this. It's on brand. It's really beautiful. And I'm like, $500 for a headband? Okay, maybe next launch, right? And so I snapped a pic at the Gucci store. And sometimes just us showing people what's possible is really gives people that vision of like, okay, like if she's doing it and she's building her business and staying consistent, then like maybe I can do that too. And eventually, but have those things too.
Oh my gosh, talk to me about window shopping and visualizing because I've done this since I was a kid and I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And people were always like, no, I hate doing that because if I can't have it, like that's torture. And I always went and I was like, yeah, but now I can see it. Like I'm such a visual person. So I'm
Mhm.
like, I have to see it. So I used to watch the Kardashians and I would tell Peter, because he was always like, that's such a terrible show. I was like, I love watching it because I love seeing what is possible. Like I love seeing that kind of life. I love seeing the house. Like, because now I can picture it. And he
Right.
was always like, I don't know what you're talking about.
You know what? I love that you said that too about the Kardashians, right? And I'm like, everyone wants to knock them, but I'm like, they changed the world of like business, beauty, and showing what's possible from a lot of women that quote unquote didn't have a lot of talent either, right? So like that's a whole other story, but I agree with you as far as visualizing. Even a few months ago, like even like I mean a few years ago, like when I was in a place where I couldn't afford to buy, I was and my friend was going to Fashion Square and she's like, hey, I'm going to be getting a new Coach bag. You know, at the time that was like a big investment, was like a big treat, was like, hey, I'm going to go get a Coach bag. And I would just want to go for the experience of like, can I come, right? And just watch, even if I'm just here for my friend and just there for moral support, helping her pick her bag or whatever. I've always loved to be part of that experience, going with people or just even like putting yourself in that situation, right? Because when you do go to those stores or go to those places, like you show up differently also. And you just have to check yourself, like, oh, when I show up in this space, how do I show, like, I'm in the Gucci store right now. Am I just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm like, oh, hello. Yes, I'm here to look at, like it just is maybe it brings out that like higher self, that
It
next
totally
level.
does.
And then it reminds you like, okay, I belong here. It makes you comfortable in that environment.
And I think there are women, and maybe you can relate to this, that go, well, if I can't buy anything, I feel bad. Like going into the store, like I can't even go in. I shouldn't go in if I can't buy anything. What would you say to that?
So with COVID, there was when I went to go buy that backpack, right? For Louis Vuitton, they were only letting a certain amount of people go into the store. And there was a line around the entrance. And I was like, okay, why is there, I was like, man, everybody's trying to buy a bag. But the truth is that a lot of the people just were waiting in line just to go in to look. Like not everybody that goes in buys, right? And so you're just in line, and I still had to wait, and I saw people go in and come out empty handed. And I mean, you never want to categorize people and be like, oh, they're going to buy or they're not going to buy. But what I saw also from that experience was like, oh, there are people that literally just want to come and look around and just want to see what's, like, I don't know, it's different than just seeing it online, just being able to try it on. So I think
Well,
that you can still make that part of the experience. And just even if you share with the girl that's at the Louis Vuitton store, now we're friends, but I'm like, hey, I just built that relationship. I've been in there before where I haven't bought anything, but next time,
yeah.
do you have a card? Do you have a blah, blah, blah? And now I know, and her name's Myra, but I'm like, hey, like we're on a first name basis. We're just building that relationship too, of like asking people like, hey, I'm not really going to buy anything, but what do you recommend? Or how, like, what's the most popular, right? Just ask those
Yeah.
questions.
Well, and I think it comes down to having the belief that you're worth being in the store, period.
Yes.
Right? I think that's what really holds women back. It's not that you can't buy anything, because
Mm.
technically you probably could, right? If you had to. It's having that belief that you're worth mingling with those kinds of people. You're worth being in that kind of an environment, being taken care of, and you're worth being in the store. Even if someone comes up to you and is like, how can I help you today? And you're like, I'm just looking. That's not an inconvenience to anyone, right? You're not inconveniencing anyone. You're not taking, but I think as women have this like, oh, I'm hindering someone, or I'm an inconvenience if I'm not worth their time, if I'm not investing, if I'm not buying. And I'm always like, well, you're not going to get there to be with those types of people if you don't have the belief that you're worth just being in the space.
Mm. Wow. Yes. I'm like, let me write that one down. So good.
So I think like I love that you have the practice of going and showing up and just hanging out in those types of environments, because yes, if you want to become that type of person, if you want to level up, if you want to become that highest version of you, if you want to be surrounded by abundance and like a different lifestyle, you need to go start experiencing it right now. And
Yeah.
that means getting into stores where maybe you're not buying anything, but you're walking around, or going to the nicest neighborhood in your town and walking and just looking at the houses. I love finding the nicest neighborhoods wherever we live, and we drive through them. We just do it. Our kids know, like that's what we do. We're looking at houses because it expands your mind to show you what is possible. Otherwise, you're just surrounded by what you see. And you
Exactly.
can't even dream or imagine. And like you said, when you walk into a store like that, you're like, oh, you stand a little taller, right? You have a
Mhm.
little more self-respect. You feel like people are treating you differently. And you're like, yeah, like that's how I should be treated, right?
Right. And honestly, like I think about that too, because we all have really deep whys as to why we're building our business, why we're on this mission, right? We all want to serve, we all want to help, we all want to inspire, motivate, right? All of those things, but we also have some superficial whys, and that's okay too. It's okay to have the superficial why. It's okay to want the Tesla, the Mercedes, the Louis Vuitton. It's okay to want the Louboutins, right? Like that's okay, but own it. Like for me, I'm like, hey, like just own it. Like, yeah, I do want a car that's better than what I have now. I do want a house that's maybe a little bit bigger than what I have now. And just saying it and owning it unapologetically to where you think about, well, why do I want that? Right. And like, that's what you said is like, well, it does. Is it going to help me feel more confident and like, pull my shoulders back a little bit more and help me show up as a different version and help me feel more confident so that I can build my business better, faster, show up higher, and
Yeah.
then make more money?
Totally.
Yes. Cool. That's worth it for me. That's worth the investment.
I
Yes.
know
I'll take
you're,
that.
yeah, yes, I'll take the bag. I totally want to go shopping with you now, even if we're just visualizing. So
Yeah.
text me. But I know you're a woman of faith. What do you say to people that come from like a faith background and they're like, yeah, but like that's materialistic. And like, I wouldn't spend money on that just because I don't think that God would want me to spend my money on that.
Yeah. So you know what? I love this question too because I am a woman of faith, and a lot of my my beliefs around money were more so just focused in like maybe rooted in fear, right? Oh, I don't want to like just saving for a rainy day. Don't say like what if you need it later? What if you need it later? Just more of scarcity. What I found was whenever I have successful launches, because with our businesses, like it's not like we just have a consistent like like every week we have a paycheck that we cut 10% out of, right? It's more so like when I have a launch, I just love to give my 10%. I don't just do 10. I always do 11. That's my favorite number, but I always give what belongs to God first, right? So it takes away the fear and the pressure of that and just being like, I have given my 11% to my church, which is, God's law. And then I feel like more liberated with that. And I told you guys, I balance my budget. What should I put back into my business? What should I, and everybody has their system of how they balance their budget, but there's definitely no bad vibes with, like, the Bible doesn't say don't have nice things. Like even some of the women, right? Like the Proverbs 31 women, like I bet she was Louis Vuitton head to toe. She was wearing those nice robes, right? She was up late at night. She was just doing like her business late at night. She was so I just feel like, yeah, like even there's no shame in that for sure. I
I
never,
love
yeah.
I love that you see the Proverbs 31 woman in Louis Vuitton because I definitely grew up with a different perspective of what she was wearing. But I like the Louis Vuitton. I'm like, I'm going to take that.
Honestly, the Proverbs 31 woman is an entrepreneur, period. Like you go
Yes.
through that again and you're like, actually, she's up late at night. She's still taking care of her family. She's taking some money, she's investing it. She sees a field, she reinvests it. Like she's an entrepreneur. So when I picture her, I'm like, that girl's a boss. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And then she's unapologetic about making money
Oh,
and then
yeah.
bringing that back to her family, like
That's right.
unapologetic.
Well, I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but I would love to ask you a couple more things. One, did you ever have a time in your business where you were like, oh man, I just don't know, like if I can do this, if I'm cut out for this, like maybe I should quit, maybe this isn't for me?
Mm-hmm. So I was kind of sharing earlier when I had my kids and I was like, okay, well, I guess this is life now. I'm not going to, like, I sold all of my businesses because I just felt like maybe I'm not meant for the entrepreneur life, right? And I'll be honest with you guys, that was the hardest time of my life because I knew I was meant for more and I knew that I was holding myself back. And when I look back at the anxiety and the depression that I didn't realize I was sitting in at that moment, but now looking back, I'm like, oh, I was really low vibe. I was really depressed at that time, but it was because I was just holding myself back, right? And so when I decided to be obedient and like to really just follow my vision and give myself one more chance, that's how I was able to get here. So right when you feel like you want to quit and there isn't any more left in you, you're like, wait, I still have this one other idea, or I still have this one other shot. Like, let me just try that one more time. Always try one more time.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. Tell everyone where they can find you and how they can
Yeah.
work with you.
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram at Latina Business Coach, and that's also my website, latinabusinesscoach.com. As you guys know, it was totally free when I found it, like the availability of the name. And you can find me on Instagram if you guys have any questions. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear, or just hear more about it, see how I can support you. Thank you so much for your time, Joy, and for bringing me on. We are for sure going to go window shopping, and yeah. And honestly, I'm a bad influence too, so we'll probably walk out with a bag or two.
You know what? It's on my list is a Louis Vuitton bag. So I'll have to do it with you. That'll be so fun.
Yep, me, you, and Raquel, we'll go.
Yes. Thank you for coming on today. Everybody, if you loved the episode, take a screenshot, tag us on your Instagram, and tell us what you loved about this and where you're going to go visualize, because we want to hear. We'll cheer you on. We'll be like, yeah, girl, go get it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yep.